Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhutreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsvarup Das Goswami, Volume 2, Planting the Seed, New York City, 1965 to 1966. Chapter 18th, Breaking Ground. So Prabhupada had moved into 26 Second Avenue. And here again, he will go through lots of struggles. Let's read. By the summer of Srila Prabhupada's arrival at 26 Second Avenue, the first front in the great youth rebellion of the 60s had already entered the Lower East Side. Here they were free to live in simple poverty and express themselves through art, music, drugs, and sex. The talk was of spiritual searching. LSD and marijuana were the keys, opening new realms of awareness. Notions about Eastern cultures and Eastern religions were in vogue. Through drugs, yoga, brotherhood, or just by being free, somehow they would attain enlightenment. That was their thought process. Everyone was supposed to keep an open mind and develop his own cosmic philosophy by direct experience and drug-expanded consciousness, blended with his own eclectic readings. And if their lives appeared aimless, at least they had dropped out of a pointless game where the player sells his soul for material goods and in this way support a system that is already rotten. The youth at that time, they were really aimless. They didn't know what to do. So it was that in 1966, thousands of young people were walking the streets of Lower East Side, not simply intoxicated or crazy, though they often were, but in search of life's ultimate answers, in complete disregard of the establishment and the day-to-day life pursued by millions of straight Americans. That the prosperous land of America could breed so many discontented youths surprised Prabhupada. Of course, it will also further prove that material well-being, the hallmark of American life, could not make people happy. Prabhupada did not see the unhappiness around him in terms of immediate social, political, economic, and cultural causes. Neither slum conditions nor youth rebellions were the all-important realities. These were mere symptoms of a universal unhappiness to which the only cure was Krishna consciousness. He sympathized with the miseries of everyone, but he saw the universal solution. Prabhupada had not made a study of the youth movement in America before moving to the Lower East Side. He had never even made specific plans to come here amid so many young people. But in the 10 months since Calcutta, he had been moved by the force of circumstances, or as he understood it, by Krishna's will, from one place to another. On the order of his spiritual master, he had come to America, and by Krishna's will, he had come to the Lower East Side. His mission here was the same as it had been on the Bowery or uptown or even in India. He was fixed in the order of his spiritual master in the Vedic view, a view that wasn't going to be influenced by the radical changes of the 1960s. Now, if it so happened that these young people, because of some change in the American cultural climate, were to prove more receptive to him, then that would be welcome. And that would also be by Krishna's will. So Krishna was arranging everything for Prabhupada. So these youth who were disillusioned by the country, by the leaders, even their parents also. And they were all gathering in this side of New York, Lower East Side, where Prabhupada got his place at 26 Second Avenue. Actually, because of the ominous influence of the Kali millennium, this was historically the worst of times of spiritual cultivation, hippie revolution or not. And Srila Prabhupada was trying to transplant Vedic culture into a more alien ground than had any previous spiritual master. So he expected to find his work extremely difficult. Yet, in this generally bad age, just prior to Prabhupada's arrival on the Lower East Side, tremors of dissatisfaction and revolt against the Kali Yuga culture itself began vibrating through American society, sending waves of young people to wander the streets of New York's Lower East Side in search of something beyond the ordinary life, looking for alternatives, seeking spiritual fulfillment. These young people, broken from their stereotyped materialistic backgrounds and drawn together now on the New York's Lower East Side, were the ones who were by chance or choice or destiny to become the congregation for the Swami's storefront offerings of kirtan and spiritual guidance. And they really came along. The Swami's arrival went unnoticed. The neighbors said someone new had taken the gift shop next to the laundry. There was a strange picture in the window now, but no one knew what to make of it. Some passerby noticed a piece of paper announcing classes in Bhagavad Gita taped to the window. A few stopped to read it, but no one knew what to make of it. They didn't know what Bhagavad Gita was. And the few who did thought maybe a yoga bookstore or something. The Puerto Ricans in the neighborhood would look in the window at Harvey Cohen's painting and then blankly walk away. The manager of the mobile gas station next door couldn't care less who had moved in. It just didn't make any difference. The tombstone sellers and undertakers across the street didn't care. And for the drivers of the countless cars and trucks that passed by, Swamiji's place didn't even exist. But there were young people around who had been intrigued with the painting, who went up to the window to read the little piece of paper. Some of them even knew about the Bhagavad Gita, although the painting of Lord Chaitanya and the dancers didn't seem to fit. A few thought maybe they would attend Swami Bhaktivedanta's classes and check out the scene. Then came July 1966. Very important month for ISKCON. Howard Wheeler was hurrying from his apartment to Mott Street to a friend's apartment on the 5th Street, a quiet place where he hoped to find some peace. He walked up Mott Street to Houston, turned right, and began to walk east, across Bowery, past the rushing traffic and stumbling derelicts, and towards 2nd Avenue. Howard. After crossing Bowery, just before 2nd Avenue, I saw Swamiji jauntily strolling down the sidewalk, his head held high in the air, his hand in the beat bag. He struck me like a famous actor in a very familiar movie. He seemed ageless. He was wearing the traditional saffron-colored robes of a sannyasi and quaint white shoes with points. Coming down Houston, he looked like the genie that popped out of Aladdin's lamp. Howard, aged 26, was a tall, large-bodied man with long dark hair, a profuse beard, and black-framed eyeglasses. He was an instructor in English at Ohio State University and was fresh from a trip to India, where had been looking for a true guru. Prabhupada noticed Howard, and they both stopped simultaneously. Howard asked the first question that popped into his mind. "Are you from India?" Prabhupada smiled. "Oh, yes. And you?" Howard. I told him no, but that I had just returned from India and was very interested in his country and the Hindu philosophy. He told me he had come from Calcutta and had been in New York almost 10 months. His eyes were as fresh and as cordial as a child's, and even standing before the trucks that roared and rumbled their way down Houston Street, he emanated a cool tranquility that was unshakably established in something far beyond the great metropolis that roared around us. Howard never made it to his friend's place that day. He went back to his own apartment on Mott Street to Keith and Wally, his roommates, to tell them and everyone he knew about the guru who had inexplicably appeared within their midst. Keith and Howard had been to India. Now they were involved in various spiritual philosophies. And their friends used to come over and talk about enlightenment. 18-year-old Chuck Barnett was a regular visitor. See how young they were, 26, 18, 24, something like that. Not too old, but they were interested. Chuck, you would open the door of the apartment and thousands of cockroaches would disappear into the woodwork. And the smell was enough to knock you over. So Keith was trying to clean the place up and kick some people out. They were sharing the rent, Wally, Keith, Howard, and several others. Due to a lack of any other process, they were using LSD to try and increase their spiritual life. Actually, we were all trying to use drugs to help in meditation. Anyway, Wally, Howard, and Keith were trying to find the perfect spiritual master, as we all were. Howard remembers his own spiritual seeking as reading books on Eastern philosophy and religion, burning lots of candles and incense, and taking ganja and peanut and LSD as aids to meditation. So, because they didn't know. So, they were just trying everything. Actually, it was more intoxication than meditation. Meditation was a euphemism that somehow connected our highs with our readings. Keith, 29, the son of a Southern Baptist minister, was a PhD candidate in history at Columbia University. He was preparing his thesis on the rise of revivalism in the southern United States. Dressed in old denim cutoffs, sandals, and t-shirt, he was something of a guru among the Mart Street coterie. Wally was in his 30s, shabbily dressed, bearded, intellectual, and well-read in Buddhist literature. He had been a radio engineer in the army and, like his roommates, was unemployed. He was reading Alan Watts, Herman Hesse, and others talking about spiritual enlightenment and taking LSD. In India, Howard and Keith had visited Hardwar, Rishikesh, Banaras, and other holy cities, experiencing Indian temples, hashish, and dysentery. One evening in Calcutta, they had come upon a group of sadhus chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and playing hand cymbals. For Howard and Keith, as for many Westerners, the essence of Indian philosophy was Shankar's doctrine of impersonal oneness. Everything is false except the one impersonal spirit. They had bought books that told them, whatever way you express your faith, that way is a valid spiritual path. So basically, in Hindi, it is a yato mat tato pat. As you like, like here it says, whatever way you express your faith, yato mat tato pat, that way is a valid spiritual path. How? Nobody asks this question. Even if somebody tells you tomorrow, oh, whatever way you want to make progress, you can do so. I mean, even in our day-to-day life, if somebody is an engineer, it's not like he's going to become a computer engineer by doing whatever he wants. No, we have to follow something, some process. Now the three roommates, Howard, Keith, and Wally, began to mix various philosophies into a hodgepodge of their own. Howard would mix in a little Whitman, Emerson, Thoreau, and Blake, and Keith would cite biblical references, and Wally would add a bit of Buddhist wisdom, and they all kept up on Timothy Leary, Thomas A. Kempis, and many others. The whole mixture being subject to a total re-evaluation whenever one of the group experienced a new cosmic insight through LSD. This was the group that Howard returned to that day in July. Excitedly, he told them about the Swami, how he looked and what he had said. Howard told how after they had stood and talked together, the Swami had mentioned his place nearby on 2nd Avenue, where he was planning to hold some classes. Howard: I walked around the corner with him. He pointed out a small storefront building between 1st, 2nd Streets, next door to a mobile filling station. It had been a curiosity shop, and someone had painted the words "matchless gifts" over the window. At that time, I didn't realize how prophetic those words were. This is a good area, he asked. I told him that I thought it was. I had no idea what he was going to offer at his classes. But I knew that all my friends would be glad that an Indian Swami was moving into the neighborhood. The word spread, although it wasn't so easy now for Carl Jurgens and certain others to come up from the Bowery and Chinatown. They had other things to do. Roy Dubois, a 25-year-old writer for comic books, had visited Prabhupada on the Bowery, and when he heard about the Swami's new place, he wanted to drop by. James Green and Bill Epstein had not forgotten the Swami and they wanted to come. The Paradox restaurant was still a live connection and brought new interested people. And others like Stephen Guarino saw the Swami sign in the window. Steve, age 26, was a caseworker for the city's welfare department. And one day on his lunch break, he was walking home from the welfare office at 5th Street and 2nd Avenue. He saw the Swami's sign taped to the window. He had been reading a paperback Gita and he promised himself he would attend the Swami's class. That day, as he stood with the Swami before the storefront, Howard had also noticed a little sign in the window, lectures in Bhagavad Gita, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Will you bring your friends? Prabhupada had asked. Yes, Howard promised, Monday evening. The summer evening was warm, and in the storefront, the back windows and front door were opened wide. Young men, several of them dressed in black denims and button-down sport shirts with broad, dull stripes, had left their worn sneakers by the front door and were now sitting on the floor. Most of them were from the Lower East Side. No one had to go to the great trouble to come here. The little room was barren. No pictures, no furniture, no rug, not even a chair. Only a few plain straw mats. A single bulb hung from the ceiling into the center of the room. It was 7 o'clock and about a dozen people had gathered when the Swami suddenly opened the side door and entered the room. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and the saffron cloth that draped his torso left his arms and some of his chest bare. His complexion was smooth, golden brown, and as I watched him, his head shaven, his ears long-lobed, and his aspect grave, he seemed like pictures they had seen of Buddha in meditation. He was old, yet erect in his posture, fresh and radiant. His forehead was decorated with the yellowish clay markings of the Vaishnavas. Prabhupada recognized big, bearded Howard and smiled. Oh, you have brought your friends. Yes, Howard answered in his loud, resonant voice. Ah, very good. Prabhupada stepped out of his white shoes, sat down on the thin mat, faced his congregation, and indicated they could all be seated. He distributed several pairs of brass hand cymbals and briefly demonstrated the rhythm 1, 2, 3. He began playing a startling, ringing sound. He began singing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Now it was the audience chant, he told them. Some already knew, gradually the others caught on, and after a few rounds, all were chanting together. So, classes have started now. Many of these young men and the few young women present had, at one time or other, embarked on a psychedelic voyage in search of a new world of expanded consciousness. Boldly and recklessly, they had entered the turbulent, forbidden waters of LSD, Piat, and magic mushrooms. Heedless of warnings, they had risked everything and done it. Yet, there was merit in their valor, their eagerness to find extra dimensions of the self, to go beyond ordinary existence, even if they didn't know what the beyond was or whether they would ever return to the comfort of the ordinary. Nonetheless, whatever truth they had found, they remained unfulfilled. And whatever worlds they had reached, these young psychedelic voyagers had always returned to the Lower East Side. Now they were sampling the Hare Krishna mantra. When the kirtan suddenly sprang up from the Swami's cymbals and sonorous voice, they immediately felt it was going to be something far out. It was another chance to trip out, and willingly they began to flow with it. They would surrender their minds and explore the limits of the chanting for all it was worth. Most of them had already associated the mantra with the mystical Upanishads and Gita, which had called out to them in the words of mystery, eternal spirit, negating illusion. But whatever it is, in this Indian mantra, let it come, they thought. Let its waves carry us far and high. Let's take it and let the effects come. Whatever the price, let it come. The chanting seemed simple and natural enough. It was sweet and wasn't going to harm anyone. It was, in its own way, far out. See, that was one thing about these youngsters, hippies. They were not afraid of trying out something new. They just didn't know anything. The problem in India is the youth, they think they know a lot. So why try out something new? So that's why, I mean, now it is taking hold. But this is a common excuse. Oh, we know Krishna. Here they don't know anything, and they were ready to try it on. Because this is what American culture is. They're not afraid of something new. As Prabhupada chanted in his own inner ecstasy, he observed his motley congregation. He was breaking ground in a new land now. As the hand cymbals rang, the lead and response of the Hare Krishna mantra swelled, filling the evening. Some members were annoyed. Puerto Rican children, enchanted, appeared at the door and window looking. Twilight came. Exotic it was, yet anyone could see that his Swami was raising an ancient prayer in praise of God. This wasn't rock or jazz. He was a holy man, a Swami, making a public religious demonstration. But the combination was strange. An old Indian Swami chanting an ancient mantra with a storefront full of young American hippies singing along. Prabhupada sang on, his shaved head held high and tilted, his body trembling slightly and with emotion. Confidently, he led the mantra, absorbed in pure devotion, and they responded. More passersby were drawn to the front window and open door. Some cheered, but the chanting was too strong. Within the sound of the kirtan, even the car horns were a faint staccato. The vibration of auto engines and the rumble of trucks continued, but in the distance now, unnoticed. Gathered under the dim electric light in the bare room, the group chanted after their leader, growing gradually from a feeble, hesitant chorus to an approximate harmony of voices. They continued clapping and chanting, putting into it whatever they could, in hopes of discovering its secrets. The Swami was not simply giving some 5-minute sample demonstration. For the moment, he was a leader, the guide in an unknown realm. Howard and Keith's little encounter with the Kirtan in Calcutta had left them outsiders. The chanting had never before come like this, right in the middle of the Lower East Side, with a genuine Swami leading them. In their minds were psychedelic ambitions to see the face of God, fantasies and visions of Hindu teachings, and the presumption that it was all impersonal light. Prabhupada had encountered a similar group on the Bowery, and he knew this group wasn't experiencing the mantra in the proper disciplined reverence and knowledge. But he let them chant in their own way. In time, their submission to the spiritual sound, their purification and their enlightenment and ecstasy in chanting and hearing Hare Krishna would come. He stopped the kirtan. The chanting had swept back the world, but now the Lower East Side rushed in again. The children at the door began to chatter and laugh. Cars and trucks made their rumblings heard once more, and a voice shouted from a nearby apartment, demanding quiet. It was now past 7:30. Half an hour had elapsed. So that's the beginning. I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.